Have you ever, like, thought about that perfect notebook?
Yeah.
The one that would, like, totally organize your work life or even be, like, a really special guest book at, a wedding or something.
Right.
Or one that even just represents your brand with, like, a custom feel.
Yeah.
It always seems so simple, right? Like,
Does.
just create one.
Yeah, yeah.
But digging into this guide, what we found is that making a custom notebook is actually way more detailed than you'd think, and it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's definitely more than just the paper and the binding.
Yeah.
It's this whole process of creative vision meeting, some pretty precise manufacturing. And, this guide that we've been going through, it lays out all the different steps. And it's really interesting to see just how much thought and precision goes into making these personalized items.
And that's exactly what we're going to share
Yeah.
with you in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack that whole journey and give you a really clear look, a really engaging look behind the scenes at how these custom notebooks are made.
Yeah.
From, like, the initial idea all the way to the final product.
Right. Yeah. And it all starts with an idea, of course.
Yeah.
But it's not just, any idea.
Right.
It's one that's been carefully considered, with the notebook's purpose in mind.
Yeah.
The design and the features that would make a great wedding guest book
Yeah.
are going to be really different from what you'd want in, notebooks for a corporate team, for example. It's about tailoring that initial concept to who's going to use it and what they're going to use, if
Yeah.
a for.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit more. So it's not just about aesthetics. It's about, like, truly understanding who's going to be using this notebook and what they're going to need it for. That then leads us to the design phase, which sounds like it goes,
Yeah.
like, way beyond just picking a color and a font.
It does. The design phase is really where, where the initial idea starts to take shape. Designers might start with some simple sketches and then move on to more sophisticated digital tools.
Yeah, yeah.
They might even create what are called mood boards.
New boards.
Yeah, which are, collections of images and colors and textures
Yeah.
to help visualize the overall look and feel of the notebook.
Yeah, that's cool.
They're considering everything from, the layout of the pages inside to the texture of the cover.
Yeah.
Will the pages be lined for taking notes,
Yeah.
or blank for sketching, or
Right.
or dotted for more flexible use? Things like that.
So are they thinking about the cover material too
Oh, absolutely.
at this phase?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely thinking about the cover material, how it's going to feel, how it's going to look, how durable it needs to be,
Right, right.
all those kinds of things.
And it's the smaller details too, isn't it? Like, the guide touches on, things like the color schemes, the fonts that'll be used, even whether or not they're going to be illustrations.
Right.
And all that, like, contributes to this notebook that's not only, like, useful, but it's visually appealing.
Yeah.
And it really resonates with its intended user, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it is.
And I like how they contrasted, like, cheerful colors and maybe some inspirational quotes for, like, a student's notebook
Right.
versus, something more understated and elegant,
Yeah.
like for business executives.
Right. Yeah.
That really shows how the user is driving those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insightful,
Yeah.
the level of intentionality behind each of those design choices. It's not just about making it look good, it's about making it effective
Right,
and enjoyable for the person who's using it.
right, right.
Like, for instance, even the layout of the pages. That can have a huge impact on how easy it is to organize information.
So you've got this really well thought out design. What's the next step? Like, what's the next step in bringing this notebook to life? It seems like the materials you choose are really important
Absolutely.
for the actual notebook.
Yeah, material selection is critical. It impacts not just the look and feel,
Yeah.
but also the durability of the notebook and how pleasant it is to actually use.
Right.
Like, take the cover, for example.
Okay.
You could go with a classic leather, which, looks great.
Yeah.
It's going to last a long time.
Yeah.
Or maybe you want to go with, something a little more eco-conscious, like a recycled cardboard.
All right. Yeah.
Or there are even, these specialty textured papers that can give it a really unique feel
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the notebook.
And then the paper inside is just as vital,
Yes.
maybe even more so,
Uh-huh.
because you're writing on it, you're
Right.
drawing on it. The guide details all these different types of paper,
Right.
depending on how the notebook is going to be used.
Yeah.
Whether it's for like jotting down notes or if it's intended for someone who's going to be using like heavier inks or even markers.
Right. Exactly. Like standard line paper is great for, just general note taking.
Yeah.
But if you're working with inks that tend to bleed through,
Mm-hmm.
or, if you want to use like watercolors or markers,
Yeah, yeah.
then you're going to need a thicker bleed-proof paper.
Right.
And it seems like most people actually really value this.
Uh-huh.
The guide mentions a finding that 70% of users
Wow.
prefer high-quality paper.
That's a huge majority.
Yeah. That can handle, both ink and water-based mediums.
Okay.
So that's a pretty clear indication of what people are looking for in a notebook.
Yeah.
And it suggests that brands who are, really focusing on a superior writing experience
Mm-hmm.
will likely prioritize using, high-quality paper.
Wow, 70%. That's a lot. It really highlights how much the user experience hinges on the paper itself.
It does.
And I also thought it was interesting that the guide mentioned how Lion Paper partners with material suppliers and actually offers help in making these choices.
Right.
So it's like that they really help you navigate
Yeah, they do.
all these options.
Yeah.
That can be, pretty overwhelming.
It can. And with so many different materials out there, it's really beneficial to have some guidance from, from the people who are making the notebooks.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
can help you understand, the pros and cons of different materials.
Yeah.
And the costs
Uh-huh.
and the durability and the aesthetics,
Right.
so that you end up, making the best choice for your specific project.
Okay, so you've got the design nailed down, you picked out all the materials.
Mm-hmm.
What happens before they start making a ton of these notebooks?
Well, that's where pre-production sampling comes in.
Okay.
It's basically a trial run
Okay.
before they commit to a big order.
Yeah, yeah.
They make a sample notebook.
Okay.
And this gives the designers and the clients, a chance to actually see
Yeah.
and touch
Yeah.
what the potential final product's going to be like.
Right. So you can look at mock-ups on the computer all day long.
Yeah.
But to actually hold the sample,
Yes.
and see how it feels
Exactly.
in your hand and,
Exactly. This stage is all about, figuring out if there are any potential problems.
Yeah.
Or anything that needs to be changed before they go into full production.
Right, right.
The guide gives a good example. Like, if the cover on the sample feels too flimsy,
Yeah.
then they can decide, okay, you know what? We need to use a thicker material for the cover.
Right.
It's really important for mitigating risk
Uh-huh.
and making sure that everyone's happy
Right.
with the final product before.
Before they invest a lot of money in making a bunch of these.
Exactly.
And it sounds like they can make different kinds of samples depending on what you need.
Right.
Like whether it's like a basic dummy sample,
Yeah.
like just to see the size and the form,
Yeah.
or a more detailed sample that shows like different binding styles,
Right.
like spiral, hardcover, or even more traditional sewn binding.
Exactly.
Yeah, that level of detail in the sampling phase seems really valuable.
It is. It's all about minimizing errors in the final production run
Yeah,
and making sure that everyone knows exactly what they're going to get
yeah.
before they move forward.
All right, so the sample looks great. Everyone's happy. Now we're going to make the actual notebook, which feels like the most tangible part of the process.
Yeah.
That's where printing comes in,
Right.
right? And any extra touches, like the embellishments.
Exactly. Yeah, this is where the design really, comes to life on the materials.
Yeah.
The guide talks about several different printing methods that might be used.
Okay.
Like offset printing, which is often used for, big runs.
Why?
Digital printing for smaller quantities or for more complex designs.
Yeah.
And screen printing for, for specific effects or
Yeah.
materials.
All right.
And each method has its own its own advantages and disadvantages depending on the requirements of the project.
And then there are the embellishments, which can really add like a more premium feel
They can.
to a notebook.
Yeah.
They mentioned foil stamping and embossing, and I really like how they gave that example of a gold logo on a corporate notebook.
Uh-huh.
Like that just shows how these subtle details can make something feel, really elegant and sophisticated.
Yeah, they can.
And something that was interesting to me was how printing quality
Uh-huh.
affects how customers see the final product.
Yeah, that's important.
They pointed out that a good chunk of people, 45%, actually notice and appreciate high-quality printing,
Uh,
and that can make them more satisfied with the product and even more likely to buy from that company again.
right, right. Yeah, sharp text, vibrant colors, those things aren't just aesthetic details.
Yeah.
They contribute to the perceived value.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And after it's printed, there's the cutting and the assembly process, which sounds like it needs to be extremely accurate.
Yeah.
I imagine if the pages or the covers aren't cut correctly, the whole notebook could be misaligned
Yeah,
and not function properly.
absolutely. The guide emphasizes the importance of using, very precise machinery to
Yeah.
cut everything, the
Yeah.
covers, the pages, any inserts to the exact right dimensions.
Yeah.
Attention to detail at this stage is critical. Like even a small discrepancy
Uh-huh.
in the size of the paper
Right.
can really mess things up
Yeah.
with the binding
Yeah.
and how well the notebook functions overall.
Right.
Proper alignment during the assembly process is also really important
I mean-
for a good user experience.
Right. Right. And it sounds like Lion Paper has invested in some serious equipment for this stage. They talked about Heidelberg printing machines
Uh-huh.
and all sorts of specialized tools for die cutting, foil stamping, all the different binding methods.
Right.
And the production capacity
Yeah,
at their facilities in Cambodia and China is huge.
it is.
It's they can make thousands, tens of thousands of notebooks a day,
Yeah,
which really gives you a sense of the scale involved
it does.
when you're dealing with these larger custom orders.
It does. It really highlights the combination of skill and technology that's needed to produce these custom items efficiently and at scale while maintaining quality.
All right. So the notebooks are printed, they're put
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
Now, what really differentiates a custom notebook? It's the personalization, right?
Yes.
Like that's what really makes it unique.
Exactly. Yeah, personalization is what allows customers to to really create something unique to
Yeah.
their needs and preferences.
And the guy gave some really good examples of this, like adding individual names,
Mhm.
or a special date for a wedding guest book,
Yeah.
or incorporating a company's logo
Right.
for corporate gifts.
Right.
It's those individual touches that really elevate it from a standard notebook
Yeah.
to something so much more personal
It does.
and meaningful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just have to be names and logos, right?
No. Right.
Like they mentioned special inks to create unique visual effects, or even hand-painted designs
Right.
for something really, really special.
Yeah. And it's interesting, nearly 60% of buyers
Wow.
have expressed interest in personalized items.
That's a huge number.
It is.
Like that really highlights how much people value having something that's made just for them.
Yeah, it does.
So you've invested all this creativity and effort into designing these notebooks
Yeah.
and making them. How do you ensure that what the customer gets is actually what they were hoping for?
Right.
Like that it meets the standards. That's where quality control comes in, right?
Absolutely.
That's a really important step.
It is. Quality control is essential.
Yeah.
It involves, a lot of inspection
Uh-huh.
at different stages
Yeah.
to make sure that every single notebook
Yeah.
meets the specifications
Right.
and the quality standards
Right.
that have been set.
So what are they looking for when they're doing these quality control checks?
Well, the guide mentioned things like checking for misprints
Yeah.
and making sure everything's aligned properly.
Yeah.
So, the inspectors are going to be looking for any imperfections,
Right.
whether it's a blurry print or
Yeah.
or a misaligned print
Fair.
or a page that's been bound incorrectly
Yeah.
or, a crease or damage to the cover
Right.
or any flaws in the materials.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure that every aspect of the notebook, from the paper quality
Yeah.
to how neatly it's bound,
Yeah.
meets those standards.
Right.
And that commitment to quality is really important, not just for the product itself,
Yeah.
but also for maintaining, customer trust.
Right. Because if you ordered a bunch of notebooks and they came back
Yeah.
and they had mistakes in them, That would not be good.
No, it would not.
And they pointed out that offering a guarantee can really boost consumer confidence,
Yeah.
like by a lot,
Yeah.
by 35%,
Yeah.
which is significant.
It is.
Seems like Lion Paper has a really structured approach to this
Yeah, they do.
with like really strict standards
Yes.
and processes.
Yes, a robust quality control system is really important
Yeah.
for a manufacturer.
Uh-huh.
It's the last step
Yeah.
to making sure that the customer gets a product that meets their expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So the notebooks have passed all the quality checks.
Uh-huh.
They're looking good.
Yes.
What's the final stage before it gets to the customer?
Well, that would be packaging and distribution.
Okay. And packaging is more important
Yeah.
than you might think, right?
It is. How a product is packaged is the final,
Yeah.
interaction the customer has with the product and the brand.
Right.
So it can have a big impact
Right.
on their experience
Yeah.
overall.
And the guide mentioned the growing appeal of eco-friendly packaging,
Yeah.
which makes sense. People are a lot more environmentally conscious these days.
Yeah, they are.
And it makes sense that how you package a notebook should be in line with how it's going to be used.
Right.
Right. So if it's meant to be a gift, maybe it needs a more elaborate package
Yeah.
than just an everyday notebook. And the packaging has to be, visually appealing, but it also has to be functional.
Yeah.
Right. It has to protect the notebooks during shipping
Yeah.
and make sure that they arrive in perfect condition.
Right.
And then there's distribution,
Yeah.
which is basically getting the notebooks from where they were made to their final destination.
Right.
Whether that's stores or customers who ordered online or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Efficient distribution is key,
Yeah.
especially for businesses.
Yeah.
And good communication throughout the process is essential for making sure the customers are happy.
Right.
And, addressing any issues that might come up.
Yeah. Yeah. And they even mentioned that Lion Paper uses specific packaging solutions to make sure that the notebooks don't get damaged in shipping.
Right.
Which, again, just shows their attention to detail
Yeah.
the whole way through the process.
Yeah.
So we've gone through this whole journey.
We have.
We started with just an idea.
Uh-huh.
Then we talked about the design.
Yeah.
Then we talked about choosing materials.
Uh-huh.
We talked about sampling.
Yeah.
We talked about printing.
Yeah.
We talked about all the personalization,
Right.
all the quality control,
Uh-huh.
and then finally packaging and distribution.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how much more involved making a custom notebook is than you might initially think.
It is. It's they're much more than just functional items.
Right.
They're the result of this whole process that involves creativity
Yeah.
and precision
Yeah.
and a lot of decisions at every stage.
Yeah. And thinking about all these steps and the different choices,
Mm-hmm.
like, picking the paper that feels just right and making sure that the packaging
Yeah,
protects the notebook, it really makes you appreciate the level of detail
it does.
that goes into making even something as seemingly simple as a custom notebook.
Right.
So what does all this mean for you?
Well, I think it raises a really interesting question about,
Yeah.
about how we appreciate the things we use every day.
Right.
Understanding the journey they've been on,
Yeah.
the design choices,
Uh-huh.
the materials that were used,
Yeah.
the quality control
Yeah.
can really deepen our
Our appreciation.
our understanding and
Yeah.
and maybe even our enjoyment
Right.
of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes you think about the possibilities for your own creative ideas
Mm-hmm.
and what you could create with custom manufacturing.
Right.
Whether it's a notebook or something else that you've been thinking about.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of thoughtful production behind it, waiting to bring your vision to life.
Right. Yeah, it's a good reminder that even the simplest things can be the result of a really complex and fascinating process.
Yeah.
Driven by creativity and really, careful execution.
It's really amazing.
It is.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really changed how I look at notebooks now.
Yeah.
I'm going to think about it differently next time I pick one up.
I think we all will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
It was really great.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure we'll deep dive into something else together soon.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Yeah.